Melissa Todorovic and David Bagshaw jokingly spoke about how they wanted to hurt and humiliate David's ex-girlfriend, Stefanie Rengel. They talked about it for months and months, until their so-called joke turned into an actual plan when Melissa gave David an ultimatum. I won't sleep with you again until Stefanie's dead. What started as a joke soon became reality. And on New Year's Day 2008, one teenager lost her life, and 2 high school students became killers. Before we get into today's coverage, I just wanted to pop in here and ask that you please remember to leave a like and subscribe if you've not done so already. It's a free way that you can help me out. So let's get into today's case. Stefanie Rengel was born to parents Patricia and Adolfo on 3 June 1993 in East York in Toronto, Canada. Patricia is in the Toronto Police Force, and Adolfo, who is a Venezuelan immigrant, is a court officer for the same police service. When Stefanie was 2 years old, they welcomed their son, Ian. Sadly, the relationship broke down and the couple divorced when Stefanie was 6 and Ian was 4. The children went on to live primarily with their mother, but they shared custody between Patricia and Adolfo. Patricia started dating fellow police officer James Hung in the year 2000. The two later married and moved into a 2-story house in Parkview Hills, a tranquil neighborhood in East York, with the kids. The couple later welcomed 2 boys, Eric and Patrick. Adolfo also remarried a fellow court officer, a woman by the name of Maureen, and they welcomed a daughter named Alyssa together. Patricia's 2 older sisters also lived in Parkview Hills, and Stefanie and Ian biked and skateboarded from one house to the other with their 5 cousins. The Hung home was a hangout for the children's friends, and the first floor den was often crammed with kids stretched out on the floor for sleepovers. Patricia and James were strict but fair. Stefanie was very expressive with her appearance. She loved dressing up in ways that no one would expect, like showing up to school wearing a tutu and sneakers, and the next day a pair of shorts with hearts all over them over a pair of tights. She absolutely loved Avril Lavigne's style and loved shopping at thrift stores. She dyed her hair red, blonde, brown, blue, black, and usually you would see her wearing dark eyeliner and brightly colored beaded bracelets. Stefanie was allowed to have Facebook as long as her mother knew the password. Patricia also did random spot checks and installed a keystroke monitoring program on the family's computer. She was also allowed to have a boyfriend, but they were only allowed to spend time together in the family home. When Stefanie visited her father and stepmother Maureen at their home in Whitby, the rules were also very clear-cut. Adolfo also monitored Stefanie's computer use and didn't allow her to use a webcam. The kids had to be home before dark, and Adolfo regularly reminded Stefanie, whom he affectionately nicknamed Reina, which means queen, to be careful about whom she trusted and where she went, since Stefanie was extremely trusting of people. Her parents allowed her to get a septum piercing, but made it clear that she was not allowed to wear it at church, where she helped teaching Sunday school. At the same church, she also attended youth group and loved music, almost all music, from Christian rock bands to Latin music to Panic at the Disco. Drama and creative writing were Stefanie's main interests. Poetry was her passion, and she also loved to act. Her family had no reason to fret over this skill when she hit her teens. Stefanie was an extremely responsible youth, in part because she was the oldest in her generation of Rengels and Hungs. In 2005, Stefanie was 12 when she met 15-year-old David Bagshaw, and they started hanging out. She was flattered by the attention of a broad-shouldered high school football player, and he was her first real crush. David Bagshaw was born on the 5th of January 1990 at Scarborough Centenary Hospital. He was born to mother Cindy and father Ronald. Cindy was extremely sick during her pregnancy and suffered from both diabetes and toxemia. From the start, David, who would be an only child due to Cindy's health, never walked but always ran, never napped, was always hyper, and talked extremely fast and non-stop. From his earliest years, David Bagshaw was a problem child and regularly showed bursts of aggression. Cindy sadly suffered a heart attack when David was 3 and suffered from ill health thereafter. In daycare, David started having behavioral problems, and the problems increased in kindergarten. By the age of 5, David was diagnosed with ADHD and placed on Ritalin. He also started getting into frequent fights at school. His first of many suspensions was in grade 1. This meant that he was bounced from school to school and was frequently absent. From grade 3, he was placed in the first of several behavioral classes, and soon after he had been diagnosed as having oppositional defiant disorder, conduct disorder, and antisocial personality disorder. When he was 12 or 13, his mother accused his father of assault, which his father denied. The matter was resolved through a 1-year peace bond and Ronald moving out. David did not take his parents' separation well. His loyalties were caught between them, and he started splitting his time between homes. During this time, he and his mother also started having serious conflicts. In 2002, she reported that he was verbally abusive and always angry, and she also said that he had abused her. In his first year of high school, his mother suffered several strokes and could not take care of herself properly, and he was forced to help run her household. At East York Collegiate, where he attended high school, he was assigned a special education mentor/teacher, as he had trouble maintaining focus, controlling his anger, and following the rules, and he started acting out even more. It was during this time that David and Stefanie would meet in the park near her house or have lunch together at a pizza joint. But after, David left a message at her home, expressing his desire for a more intense relationship that included giving him oral sex. Patricia told Stefanie to stay away from him. At first, Stefanie was angry with her mother because she felt that she didn't trust her to resist the older teen's advances, but eventually she agreed with her mom and that it would be best to move on. Between the ages of 15 and 16, David moved in with his father but was kicked out for bad behavior, and he ended up living in a group home for troubled teens for 5 months. He later moved back in with his father, however. Even with all the difficulties in David's life, he stated that he always felt loved by his parents. David went on to date 4 or 5 other girls after Stefanie, but wasn't really all that serious with anyone. In March 2007, the then 17-year-old David Bagshaw started dating 15-year-old Melissa Todorovic, who attended the same school as him. Melissa lived with her parents Zoran and Rachel Todorovic and her younger brother Nicholas. Her father was a mechanic and a Serbian immigrant who often took her and her brother to hockey games and on fishing trips. Melissa was said to be very close to her mother, who worked as a nurse at a cookie factory. The family had gone on vacations to Mexico and the Caribbean, and made regular summer trips to their family cottage. Melissa was a straight A student and worked hard to obtain and maintain her grades. Her grade 8 report card described her as considerate, helpful, and independent, and stated that she had excellent study habits. If Stefanie was what someone would call creative, artistic, expressive, and confident, Melissa was the complete opposite. She was a conformist. She wore glasses and braces and suffered with anxiety about her appearance, especially her weight. She thought that her breasts were too small, her hands were fat, and her toes were way too long. And she regularly talked about how she wanted plastic surgery to fix her nose, which she said was too bumpy. Every morning, she would spend at least half an hour in the bathroom, painstakingly straightening her wavy hair. On rainy days, she'd even take a straightener to school with her. When she was really stressed about her weight, or someone made a comment about it, she would also make herself throw up. She lacked self-confidence and was convinced that she needed a boyfriend to validate herself. Before David, Melissa dated 3 other boys, and with each of these relationships, she became more dysfunctional. After one of those relationships ended, she also self-harmed. She monitored the email of the boyfriend she had before David, and when they broke up, she threatened to hurt his new girlfriend, and called her a skank. She also insulted this former boyfriend's sexual behavior, the way he smelled, the clothing he wore, his physical appearance, and even went as far to talk crap about his pubic hair. Yep, you heard right, his pubic hair. I don't even know what to say about that, honestly. And when she started dating David, she also threatened this ex that she would get him to beat him and his girlfriend up. From the start, Melissa and David's relationship was stormy. Or maybe that's not the right word. More like a tornado or a cyclone, if you get the gist. The relationship was sexual straight from the start, and was marked by jealousy and possessiveness from both sides. David's father disliked Melissa and didn't allow her in their house. For one, he felt that she was extremely controlling, and was quite disturbed when he found out that she had installed spyware on David's computer. He also was quite upset, rightfully so, when he found out that she was leaving disrespectful notes to David's mother, calling her a bad parent. But that didn't stop David from seeing Melissa. Melissa's parents in turn were also not fans of David, who constantly cheated on Melissa, and on occasion his anger got so out of control that he would hit her. Her parents urged her to call off the relationship, but she told her mom, "Who's going to look at somebody with braces and glasses when there's so many pretty girls in high school?" So they kept on seeing each other. Stefanie had known Melissa's cousin and with good intentions asked her to tell Melissa that David had been flirting with her and other girls behind Melissa's back. But when this got back to Melissa, she was furious, but her anger was not pointed at David. Even though Melissa had never met Stefanie, she knew that Stefanie, and I say this loosely, had dated David briefly over 2 years ago. So she decided to test David and randomly asked him whether he thought that Stefanie was pretty, to which he answered yes. This was a big kick in the gut for Melissa, who started to obsessively look at Stefanie's pictures on Facebook, and slowly she got angrier and angrier. And slowly but surely, Melissa started to develop an idea, a solution, and a fantasy of sorts that would solve her quote-unquote problem. Kill Stefanie. Yep, kill a 14-year-old girl that hung out with your cheating boyfriend like 3 times 2 years ago when she was 12. Make it make sense. And pretty soon she told David about this. But was she joking or was she serious though? Once this idea was formed and said out loud, it became the central dynamic that drove their warped teenage relationship. On the 22nd of May, 2007, Melissa accused David of speaking with Stefanie, and in an online chat session, she expressed her anger at Stefanie, stating, "I'm going to effing stab her if I want to, then I'll just kill her." The next day, David offered to bring her a knife, and she told him that she already had one, texting him, "I even brought it to school today, LOL." Melissa also told him that she was going to persuade her brother to sexually assault Stefanie. Like, what the hell? This girl is disgusting. I'm sorry, but I can't. In their online chats and text messages, she and David discussed kidnapping Stefanie and taking her to a place where Melissa could kill her. David then jokingly suggested waiting until the end of the school term when he could get a getaway car, which she was not happy with, and she responded, "Fine, no sex until then," a thinly veiled threat that would soon turn into an ultimatum. Over the summer, their flippant conversation about killing Stefanie continued. Melissa told David of a dream she'd had in which she was so jealous of Stefanie that she, quote, took a knife and cut off her boobs, then made a slit down her body and threw her off a balcony. What kind of sick fantasies does this girl have, people? Make it make sense. As the conversations and so-called fantasies became more and more elaborate, they started to form a plan. She wrote him, "I don't want to kill her, LOL. Like, I don't care if someone kills her, but I don't want to, LOL. Not sure what the LOLing is all about though. Nothing to laugh about here." So she told him, since she didn't want to do it, he has to, and reiterated that she would not have sex with him again until he killed Stefanie. In the fall of 2007, Stefanie began grade 9 at Rosedale Heights School of the Arts, where she made many new friends. At lunch, she would walk to a nearby supermarket and buy a ham sandwich or snack from the samples of olives and Oreo cookies, and she even enrolled into the drama club, living her life happily oblivious to the fact that another teenager saw her as a bitter love rival because of a boy she hadn't even thought about in forever. On the night of 20 October, after being constantly berated and pressured by Melissa to just kill Stefanie already, David walked to Stefanie's home and phoned her from the driveway, trying to lure her out of the house to quintessentially go through with the plan of killing her. But when she came outside, he couldn't go through with it and blurted out, "Melissa wants me to stab you." He turned to walk away, dropping his phone on the ground, looked back at Stefanie and told her, "When she calls, tell her I tried, so she'll stop pestering me to kill you." This incident scared the bejesus out of Stefanie, and she went to tell her mother about what happened. Patricia was immediately upset, as she should be, and called Melissa, warning her to stay away from Stefanie. But Melissa wasn't easily intimidated and responded, "Well, Stefanie has to stop spreading rumors about me." Patricia was surprised at the attitude Melissa was giving her and attempted to explain to her that Stefanie only wanted to make sure that she knew about what David was doing behind her back so that she wouldn't end up getting hurt. She explained to her that Stefanie had gone through the same thing with one of her recent boyfriends and simply didn't want another girl to be blindsided like she was. But Melissa was not having any of it and was disrespectful and angry. Patricia saw that her Mrs. Nice Guy tactics weren't working, so she switched into cop mode and threatened Melissa that she would get a restraining order against her and ended the call. The Hungs returned David's cell phone to his mother that very same night and asked her to please keep her son away from Stefanie. David's mother ended up accusing Stefanie of stealing David's phone. Okay. Patricia, though initially concerned, decided to write the incident off as teenage melodrama and decided not to get the police involved. Unfortunately, Patricia's threat didn't stop the murder plot. Instead, it just fired Melissa up even more. The next day, Melissa and David were back at it on MSN Messenger. "What about Steph?" he wrote. "Bang bang," responded Melissa. "I need a bang bang first. I wanna bang you," he replied. "I want her dead, David. LOL, she wrote back. "We've been through this, even if it takes you a week." Through the next 2 months, the discussions continued, with Melissa constantly pestering David to just get it over with. On the 15th of December, Melissa was again nagging David about failing to keep his promise and told him to get a gun. 2 days later, she again taunted David and threatened to dump him and go out with someone else, telling him, "You're getting blocked until you kill her." On New Year's Eve at about 6:30 p.m., while Stefanie and her extended family were gathered inside, David approached the Hung house. He was seen by a neighbor lurking around the yard, speaking on his phone. He was more than likely speaking to Melissa, since they called and texted one another 65 times that night. Whilst he was outside Stefanie's house, he phoned her several times, but Stefanie never came outside. Stefanie was too busy having the time of her life with her family, drinking sparkling cider and singing Avril Lavigne on a karaoke machine her parents rented for New Year's Eve. Just before midnight, Stefanie counted down to the new year with her family, and everyone embraced. Patricia and James made a point of being in the moment together, because they knew that soon enough their kids would be older and wanting to hang out with their friends. The next day was a fresh start, the first day of 2008. It was cold and snowy, and the air was still filled with New Year's resolutions. Melissa had made her own New Year's resolution. She was shutting David out. He texted her 3 times that morning. "Where are you? You're cheating. Why won't you answer me?" And he also tried phoning her several times. At 3 p.m., Melissa finally called David back, and they spoke for 15 minutes. And in a later text, she reminded him of her plans to, as she put it, go on top with another boy if he didn't kill Stefanie. At around 6 p.m., Stefanie was standing in her kitchen, eating Doritos, while brother Ian was eating a grilled cheese sandwich. They were waiting for James and Patricia to return home from visiting James's mother. When her cell phone rang at 6:08 p.m., Stefanie answered the blocked number and thought the voice on the other end belonged to her ex-boyfriend, who she had broken up with 2 months earlier. "Is that you?" she asked. The boy on the other line sounded upset, shouting, meet me across the street," and Stefanie dashed out the door, pulling on her boots but no coat, and told Ian that she'd be right back. But the caller wasn't the ex that she thought. It was David Bagshaw, the 5'11", 240-pound football player, 4 days shy of his 18th birthday, that she hadn't hung out with in 2 years. He was hiding in the bushes on the median that divides the street, waiting for Stefanie to come outside. After Melissa threatened David and dozens more calls and texts between the two, at 5:51 p.m., David called Melissa and said that he was on his way to Stefanie's house with a knife, but Melissa didn't believe him and she dropped the call. David texted and phoned her, and Melissa called David again at 6 p.m. and at 6:04 wanting updates, and at 6:08 he made the call to Stefanie. Unlike the previous night, this time he got the reaction that he had wanted. She came running outside looking for ex-boyfriend Steve. At that moment, Melissa again called, and David answered, saying, "I see her," and he ended the call. Steve was sadly not who she found. Instead, David got up from his hiding spot, carrying an 8-inch kitchen knife. Stefanie didn't stand a chance. David would end up stabbing her repeatedly, tearing through the brand new black sweater her mother gave her as a Christmas present. One stab went through the left side of her chest and hit the inside of her back. Another perforated her right lung and sliced open her liver. A third penetrated her ribs and stomach, spilling all her stomach contents. A fourth slashed her left upper arm. In total, David stabbed her 6 times, and when he was done, he ran away. Stefanie was left staggering and bleeding. She tried to walk across the street towards her house, clutching her cell phone in her hand, when someone saw her. The man jumped out of his car and held Stefanie as she moaned in pain. She collapsed into a snowbank, blood coming through her clothing. He asked what happened, and she told him that she was stabbed. He immediately phoned 911.
Does she know who did this?
You know who did this to you?
Stefanie's final words and gasp for breath captured on a 911 call where she names her own killer.
Who did it? Who did it? Bay? What's the last name?
Even though Stefanie was in incredible pain and her organs were beginning to shut down, she mumbled the name of her attacker, David Bagshaw. She said and pointed up the street. The man became frantic while he waited for the ambulance. He got a blanket from his car and wrapped her into it. She cried out in pain, and he tried to comfort her, telling her that everything was going to be okay. But she began to lose consciousness. The paramedics finally arrived and whisked Stefanie to Toronto East General, where sadly she was pronounced dead on arrival. The city's first homicide victim of 2008. Patricia's cell phone rang on the way home from James's mother's house. It was Ian. His voice was trembling. "Mummy, there's been a stabbing in our neighborhood. I don't know where Stefanie is." Patricia frantically started calling her daughter from the car, but Stefanie's phone went to voicemail. She had told Stefanie more than once that if she wanted to have a cell phone, she had to answer it. Why wasn't she answering her phone? The Hungs arrived home to find yellow police tape strung up. The street had been blocked, and an officer at the end of their driveway. "We need to know what's going on, because I can't find my daughter," she said. She also asked whether the person that committed this heinous crime was arrested, to which the officer answered no, and asked for a description of Stefanie. "She's 14 years old with dark hair," said Patricia. He told her that the victim was older, possibly in her early 20s. Patricia breathed half a sigh of relief, and then she got a sick feeling in her stomach. Stefanie could easily be mistaken for a girl in her 20s. The officer explained that the victim was taken to Toronto East General. He didn't, however, mention that she was dead. But when he offered to drive Patricia and her husband to the hospital, they knew, in the way that cops do, to prepare themselves for the worst. At the hospital, they were taken to identify the body, which ended up being Stefanie. They were taken to a private room so that they could stay with her and grieve. Everyone was in shock. How did this happen? Why did this happen? How would they start to even process this loss? David had fled to a friend's house nearby, threw away the knife, and buried his blood-stained jacket in the snow in the friend's backyard. He then phoned Melissa to tell her that he'd done it. Melissa called Stefanie's phone and was satisfied that he had gone through with it when she didn't get an answer. She told David to take a taxi to her house so he could collect his reward. On his way, he sent a text to Melissa. "I love you, honey. Can't wait to see you." When he arrived, Melissa had him reenact the killing. And extremely turned on, they ended up sleeping together. After which, she called her mother to get her a latte. Later that night, one of Melissa's friends sent her a message on Facebook to tell her that she'd heard that Stefanie had been killed, and asked Melissa whether she was worried that she'd be a suspect. "Who knows that I want her dead?" Melissa replied. "'Cause I only told you and David, so unless you told someone, only you should know. But I never did anything, and neither did David. We effed tonight. LOL." By 7:15 p.m., 2 detectives were on their way to the murder scene, and later that night, following interviews with Stefanie's parents, her brother Ian, and several of David's friends, they quickly grasped the bizarre history of Stefanie, David, and Melissa. At 2 a.m., a detective was knocking on Melissa's door to take her for questioning about David. Her mother accompanied her. Melissa's cool manner and indifferent responses flummoxed the homicide detectives. She was taken in again for questioning the next morning.
He called me and he said he was going to her house.
Okay.
And I said, okay. And then he called me, or I called him, and he said, I think I called him, and then he was like, oh wait, I see her. And then he hung up the phone. And then I called him and I said, did you kill her or something?
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, yeah. And then we were talking about him going to Steven's house.
Okay.
And then I called him at Steven's house, and he said he was going to stay at Steven's.
Okay.
And then he came over to my house.
And he came over to your house.
And then we went back home.
All right. Let's go right back to he called you and said, I'm going over to Stefanie's house. And you said, okay. But why would you say okay?
I don't know.
Well, you didn't like him even talking with Stefanie. So why was it okay that he was going over there? What was he going over there for?
Either to kill her or working it out. I don't know.
All right.
Did he tell you anything? The
I
reason
know-
why he
I
was
know.
going there?
I know in general he was going to kill her.
Okay. And this is what I need to know. How did you know in general? How did you know in general that he was going to kill her?
Because he told me.
And when did he first tell you that? And I asked you that in...
Today?
No, when did he first tell you that? Was it 9 months ago, 6 months ago, a week ago, a day ago? When did he first tell you that?
3.
3 months ago. Now, how did that come up?
Because I told him that I wanted her dead.
Okay. And why did you want her dead?
I didn't want her, like, dead. I was joking.
Okay.
Like, it's hard to explain, but when someone does something, like, oh, I want them dead,
Sure.
you don't mean it literally.
Okay.
So, and then I guess he saw that I wasn't happy and he just did it.
Okay, so going back 3 months ago when you said to him, I want her dead, what did she do to cause you to be displeased with her and make that comment, whether you're sort of serious, half serious, or joking? What did she do to make you say that?
She would call David and say she's pregnant, and then on Victoria's Day that happened. And she had a boyfriend, Steven, at the time.
Right.
And told me that she was spreading rumors about you at that time.
She was spreading rumors about me a week ago or 2 weeks ago.
And what was she saying?
She
You
said
need to be honest. I know it's awful, but you need to be honest. Please, Melissa.
she said I was giving blowjobs to guys.
To guys?
She was spreading it around the whole school.
Okay. And that was upsetting. I can tell you're upset about that. All right. And when did she start spreading those rumors?
I guess a month ago.
A month ago.
Okay, so he phones you and he says, I have a knife with an 8-inch blade and I'm going to Stephanie's house. What was your response to that?
Like, okay, do whatever you want.
And what did that mean? What did you take that to mean when you said that? What did you mean when you said, okay, do whatever you want?
I meant, if you want to kill her, kill her.
Did she say that? Those words?
I said, do whatever you want.
Well, that's not if you want to kill her, kill her.
You just said, what did I mean?
So he phones you and he says, I have an 8-inch blade knife and I'm going to Stephanie's house. And your response is, do whatever you want. What did he say to that?
Can't remember.
Did you think of calling 911 and reporting that there was a guy on a delivery to a young girl's house with a knife to kill her?
No.
How come?
I don't know.
She admitted that killing Stefanie was more her idea than David's. She said she was angry at Stefanie, even obsessed with her, because she believed that Stefanie had spread rumors saying that she was giving oral to boys. This was the only time during the interview that Melissa broke down and cried. While Melissa was being interviewed, a plainclothes officer arrived at David's mother's house in East York and arrested him. Search warrants were executed at Melissa's and David's houses. Their computers, as well as Stefanie's, were seized and turned over to forensics for investigation. Melissa and David were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The first news stories about Stefanie's death commented on how tragic it was that the daughter of 2 police officers could be murdered in front of their house. But as the story grew, the coverage intensified, especially when it turned out that Stefanie was the victim of 2 teenage killers, with a 15-year-old girl convincing a boy to commit murder. They'd planned it in thousands of text messages and emails. The murder gripped people because it was so repulsively concocted by a pair of disturbed, self-obsessed teens who seemed utterly oblivious to the gravity of their intentions. Melissa went on trial first, and during her 3-week trial in the University Avenue courthouse, Melissa kept a blank look on her face. Her lawyer argued that Melissa didn't mean it when she repeatedly told David to kill Stefanie, and that she wasn't as responsible as David, because she wasn't present at the crime scene. The prosecution's case relied on an account of Melissa and David's relationship, outlined in the 2 police interviews with Melissa and in the huge amount of emails, MSN chats, texts, and cell phone records of the calls between the 2. In fact, 30,000 pages of instant messaging transcripts were entered into evidence. Although the circumstances of Stefanie's murder were extraordinary and the murderers were deeply troubled teenage individuals, there was something about the medium where they hatched their plan that let them remain emotionally disconnected from the reality of the outcome of it. The 9 men and 3 women on the jury deliberated for 20 hours over 3 days before finding Melissa guilty of first-degree murder. Before Melissa was sentenced, she was interviewed by 2 psychiatrists who diagnosed Melissa as exhibiting some symptoms of borderline personality disorder, and she was compared to Glenn Close's character in Fatal Attraction. On the last day of her sentencing hearing, Melissa read a prepared statement to the court while looking straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with Patricia, Adolfo, Ian, and Stephanie's other family members who attended each and every day of the entire trial. Every day I wish that I could go back in time and change everything I said and have Stefanie be alive with her family again. I want you to know I take full responsibility for my part, she said. The judge wasn't swayed by her or her so-called apology. He stated that her words didn't prove unequivocal acceptance of her responsibility for the crucial role that she played in the death of Stefanie Rengel, and he ruled in favor of the prosecution's application to have Melissa sentenced as an adult, concluding that her problems had not yet been properly diagnosed, much less treated, and that she is a potential threat to society and will need lifelong monitoring. A youth sentence would have meant a maximum of 6 years in custody, 4 in the community, and then no supervision, and no criminal record. Her adult sentence was life in prison, with no chance of parole for 7 years, and her criminal record would follow her for the rest of her life. The puppet master is not less blameworthy than the puppet, the judge ruled. After Melissa's conviction, David pleaded guilty, and unlike Melissa, he cried frequently throughout his court proceedings, often hunched in his seat, with his head cradled in both hands, looking directly at Stefanie's family. He apologized to them in court, saying he could not forgive himself for the disgusting crimes of killing an innocent girl who deserved to live. His lawyer stated that David was more concerned about the pain and the suffering he caused than he was about what was going to happen to him. The judge accepted his remorse and empathy as sincere, and his role as the more reluctant of the 2 partners in this evil endeavor. However, he sentenced David Bagshaw as an adult, giving him life in prison with no chance of parole for 10 years. Melissa may have given the orders, but it was David who carried them out, the judge stated. He also stated that at any time David could have left the relationship or alerted authorities to the murder plot. 2 psychiatrists who testified at his hearing could also not say whether he would re-offend or not. Grief has been a long road for the Rengels and Hungs. Patricia often felt like she was still living in the past. At first, she struggled to do her job and considered taking up a new role in counseling other victims of crime. For a long time, she said she was virtually paralyzed by anxiety, unable to sleep, go out alone at night, or even watch television. Her mind was filled with images of harm being done to her children. Of Melissa, she said, "I want inner peace, which is believed to come from forgiveness, but I am unable to forgive someone who has shown no remorse." She also recalled the warmth and friendship Stefanie showed David, saying, "She immediately forgave his temper and violent outbursts and wished for us to do the same, which made his violation of her trust all that more painful." Adolfo Rengel framed a Christmas card Stefanie made him the week before her death, saying, "I never thought I would lose a child like this. She was smart. She named the killer. She was smart till the day that she died." In November of 2018, 26-year-old Melissa Todorovic had a hearing to determine whether she could be released on parole. Her difficulties with relationships and her struggles with jealousy were scrutinized. The board noted that Melissa had made few friendships either in prison or during her absences from the institution, which included 3 72-hour unescorted absences and several months where she was allowed to work outside the facility and return at night. Her parole officer said that she needs to work on gaining empathy and struggles to show emotion when she's under pressure. Melissa was given a chance to speak and said, "I never want to be that person again. I don't want to harm anybody else. I wish I could take everything back. I take full responsibility for Stefanie's death. If it wasn't for me, Stefanie would be alive." Patricia was also given a chance to speak and said, "I do not see a changed person in Melissa. I see someone who has become more cunning." Hoping with those few words of so-called remorse that she is fooling those who should have the experience to see through them. I do not hear empathy here, except for herself. Adolfo didn't read his statement out loud, but it was read on his behalf, and in it he said, "This woman, after 10 years since she killed Stefanie, has shown no remorse or accepted any responsibility for her part in this awful, senseless murder. Melissa Todorovic is a very smart woman and obviously extremely good at manipulating to her advantage." A decision was made to not release Melissa on full parole. Instead, she was released on day parole for 6 months. Melissa faced a restriction of friendships and romantic relationships with men and had to immediately disclose them to her parole officer. But it wasn't even 2 months before Melissa reoffended, playing to her puppet mastery ways again, when she got into an unhealthy love triangle with 2 ex-cons. But she kept it a secret. The first secret dalliance was with a high-risk offender who she'd met at a group for reintegrating former inmates. She signed herself out of her Brampton halfway house and lied about where she was going when she would meet up with him. And then, unsatisfied with his sexual prowess, she set her sights on his best friend and started an affair with him as well. All the while playing them against each other as only a cunning puppet master can do. It was only by happenstance that her clandestine hookups were uncovered when her community parole officer was informed by lover number 1's probation officer that he had seen him and Todorovic together, and he had recognized her from past media coverage on Stefanie's case. A search of her room was then instigated, where they found a Valentine's Day card from offender number 1, in which he apologized for not satisfying her and not treating her well enough. Melissa's bail was then suspended and she was returned to the Grand Valley Institution for Women for violating her conditions. A subsequent hearing was held to determine whether her day parole should be permanently revoked, whether she could apply in a year, or whether it would be reinstated under new conditions. At this hearing, Melissa said, "I knew it was wrong. I didn't have people to talk to. I liked being complimented and being given attention, and I didn't want that to end." She even tried to deflect the blame, saying that nobody had asked her whether she was in a relationship. That didn't fly with the hearing officer, who accused her of downplaying her web of lies to everyone from her family to her team of support workers. Her parole officer recommended that she remain in prison because her failure to disclose that she was involved in not 1, but 2 relationships and her manipulation of them against one another showed that she still presented an undue risk to the public. The hearing officer agreed, and so in prison she shall remain, right where she belongs. Since being incarcerated, David Bagshaw has found himself in trouble with at least one violent offence. In 2013, he was sentenced to a further 2 years and 6 months to be served concurrently after being convicted of assault with a weapon and assault causing bodily harm of a fellow inmate at Millhaven Institution. The parole board also heard that David was involved in an inappropriate relationship with a staff member and falsely claimed to be the father of his then fiance's children on a legal document. In October of 2021, David also had a parole hearing. During this, he said, "I'm disgusted at myself for what I did. I hate myself for what I did. I think about it every day. Thinking about what I did makes me sick. Thinking about what I took away from someone, what I took away from their family, it disgusts me." His parole officer described Bagshaw as a work in progress who struggles with acting impulsively. He said that while Bagshaw's aggressive behavior has diminished some, he obtained a secondary school diploma in 2013, is employed, and has been cooperative with his case management team. A suitable plan for release had not been identified, and she recommended that day and full parole be denied. When David had a chance to explain why he thought he should warrant consideration for release at that time, he answered, "It's hard to say after listening what she had to say on it. To be honest, I don't know if I warrant it." In the end, his parole was denied and he is eligible to apply again later this year in 2023. As for Steph's family, the Hung family grew when around 2 years after Stefanie's death, they adopted 2 girls from China. Patricia also became part of a new division in the Toronto Police called the Victim Witness Support Unit, where one of her jobs is to provide assistance to police officers on the other side of the badge as she found herself during that difficult time, as well as victims of crime. Stefanie's brother Ian went on to become a social worker. And to this day, Adolfo states that never does a day go by where he doesn't think about his beautiful Reina. So that is where we will be ending for today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and watching this case. I hope that you enjoyed my coverage of it. Please remember to leave your thoughts and theories in the comment section down below. I absolutely love reading them. If you haven't subscribed, please do take the time, leave a like and subscribe before you go. It's a free way that you can help me out. Until next time, stay safe out there, take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Bye!